Hello, and welcome to another one of Pat's Chats with Patrick Leeson from Out of the Basement. Today I'm joined by Sen from Bamboozle Brothers, I believe it is, correct?
Kinda. It's sort of funny. We originally started the name
Mm,
Bamboozle Brothers. We've never made anything under that name or signed a game as the Bamboozle Brothers or anything like that. But we're actually, I mean, people know the name, so it's like I guess that's who we are. Um yeah, when Jay started a printing company, a publishing company, we never called it Bamboozle Brothers because it's really just his company. It's
okay.
called Off the Page Games.
Off
So
the page games?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's his publishing imprint, but we do, I guess, self-refer as the Bamboozle Brothers. I think less people call us the Bamboozle Brothers than we call ourselves the Bamboozle Brothers. And it's
Okay.
really just a big joke because Jay is giant and not Chinese. And so it's kind of like twins.
Okay, great.
Like we
So
are
you're the
very
Danny
much
you're
not
the Danny
related.
DeVito of the group.
That would make him more Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm not sure that's a fair comparison either. But yes, that would I would be the Danny DeVito. I am the short one. Jay is the tall one. So
Now, how long
yeah.
has you guys been done in doing your games? Like, you have a few games out there, I believe.
Oh yeah, we have like I don't know 50 games.
Jeez.
We've been making stuff since well, I guess the mid to late 90s
Wow, that's
probably.
yeah, okay, that's impressive.
Yeah. So let me think. So my oldest is 20 this year. And so we started making games really, really, really seriously in 2005 when he
Okay.
was two. But then we've been playing games and like goofing around and making stuff and failing at making those things a lot longer than that. Um, because we met in the early 90s, and then probably like the mid to late 90s is when we really started making stuff, and we failed incredibly, and then we decided to pick it up later as just a way to stay together. So I think
Mhm.
actually to be very, very um to be very, very specific about when we started making board games, because we've messed around with like cards and things like that.
Yeah.
Magic gets you to kind of
Mhm.
think about what could you do with magic cards, and we'd actually cut cards up. And Jay would do this. It's funny. He would like sleeve it, and but he'd cut out stuff
Yeah.
and like a picture from the magic card. He'd glue it onto the other one and then sleeve it and play it like it was a real magic card. And he'd be like, "Oh yeah, and I cast Stream of Bears for 12 damage." We're like, "What?"
Where are you getting
What
that
is
card from?
what is Stream of Bears? And it would look like a real card because he had cut the bear from Grizzly Bear,
Oh, okay.
and he'd use Stream of Life, and he'd
Just put them
stick them
together.
together and then put them in the sleeve, and he'd play it. He'd be like, "What are you doing? What card is that?" Again, we didn't know any
Yeah, well, of
better
course, no,
at a
yeah.
certain point in life because those cards might have existed.
Hmm.
We didn't know. Anyways, so yeah, I think Magic for me was the very first game that I really could pull the veil back in almost its entirety and say, okay, I see how this is designed,
Hmm.
and then work that to my benefit in both deck building, but also in, rough game design where it's like, oh, we can make totally new sets of cards. And I had participated in like rec dot games dot magic, like Usenet stuff
Hmm.
back in the early mid 90s where it's just a bunch of nerds making fake magic cards, and that was super fun.
That's
But yeah, I think 2001 to be very specific. That's where I
yeah.
was getting to. Very specific. Our first failed board game was in 2001, and I know that to be true because it was just after I had bought my first house, which was in 2000. So it was 2001 likely, and then Ethan was born 2 years later. And then 2 years after that, we had, given up on game design really
Hmm.
for about 3 or 4 years. We still played games, but we said, I guess we suck because
Yeah, because we
it was
failed. Yeah.
really bad. Yeah. And we like put it away. We never talked about it. And now we seem to talk about it a lot because it comes up a lot. We still have it. I still have it, a box over here on a shelf over here.
Oh,
And
what's the game called there? I'll just make a quick note there to take a look at that.
you can't. It doesn't
Oh,
exist.
it doesn't
Like it's never
exist.
no,
Oh,
it's never been printed. It
you
just sits there in a
never went to the
box.
printer. Oh, okay. So how do you know it
No, no, no.
failed then? How do you know it failed?
Because we can't play it. Like it's
Oh.
unplayable. It's horrible. And it's but the funny thing is that we always knew we could do it. We just maybe didn't have the reinforcement from a success to say that you
Hmm.
can do it or you did do it.
Yeah.
We always probably thought, oh, we could do this. We can do this. Um, and so the game, we've actually taken parts of this game and used it in other games that were printed. So Akrotiri is most likely, I think, for Jay and I, in terms of games that were published by other people,
Hmm.
other companies, Akrotiri is probably our favorite just because it has that one piece of the old game that I guess we might have called it Wanna Go Jungle. We have this stupid saying between the two of us. We'll go, hey, wanna go jungle? And because it came up in games all the time that you're like, we're going to the jungle
Hmm.
for different things. And so we just said, hey, want to go jungle? And I don't think that's the actual name of the game, but I'm going to call it that
That's
from now on.
from now on, and that's what it is.
It's official. Sorry, Patrick. It
No,
is
it's
now
okay.
official.
That's all right.
And yeah, so we took the exploration part of that game and turned that into what is now Akrotiri, which is actually out of print. So
Hmm.
it's hard to find, but it's actually, I mean, you can get it probably on Amazon for a very overinflated price,
Yes.
like in the hundreds. But it originally came out, it was like $20,
Yeah.
which is a great price for the amount of game you get in the box. But anyway, so in Akrotiri, Jay and I made this game. It was basically a pick up and deliver game, which neither of us love pick up and deliver, but we were like, hey, let's our original kind of mission statement, objective, mantra, whatever you want to call it, was let's make one of every type of game and put our spin on it. And
Okay.
that's why we have a deck building game, a dexterity game, a trick taking game, like how some people like, Uwe Rosenberg, has a style of games,
Hmm.
and Stefan Feld has a very, style of game that is like that's a Feldian game. We don't have that. We make anything, which is good and bad in some ways, but very much us that we wanted to try to make a good version of everything we did,
Hmm.
which we've actually, I think, managed to do in a lot of ways. Like a lot of our games, like Junkard is the number one rated dexterity game on BGG,
Oh, nice.
which is pretty cool when you think about it.
Sorry,
Um,
junkyard?
Junk art.
Junkyard. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's out of print,
Ah.
which is a weird thing. But yeah, the notion of making different types of games. So we started making this pick up and deliver game, which was originally called Smoke Boat, where you actually went around and picked up meat and then smoked it on your boat for some reason. It was not a good theme. I have no idea why we called it that. Actually, I do have an idea why we called it that, but it may be better Jay explains what that is
Okay.
someday. Um, I think that has to do something with one of his ex-girlfriends. But anyways,
Okay.
um, we uh, we made the game and we're like, wow, this is okay, and this is a cool mechanism, but the game itself needs something more. You know, kind of like the Big Lebowski. We needed a rug to tie the room together, so
Yeah.
we needed something else to tie the game together. And I said, well, what about that other game that we made before? What if we took the part that was good,
Hmm.
got rid of all the parts that sucked, and just took that little nugget and put it in this game, and it worked. It worked brilliantly, and it became Akrotiri, which is one of our like. If people like it, they love it.
Oh, that's good.
It was a two-player game.
Hmm.
You could take two sets and mash them together and play a four-player game because originally we pitched it as a five-player game, which is a whole funny story in itself. But when it was published as a two-player game, and a lot of people really, really like it. It's one of those ones that when people list their favorite two-player games, they might say Star Realms, and they might say Jaipur, and they might say Targi, but invariably one person walks in and says, "No, it's
All
Akrotiri,"
right.
and then I get to like put a like on that
Nice.
that
Do
comment.
do you get to have you thought about having it republished then? Because you said it's out of print.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're always looking for publishers for our out of print stuff.
Hmm.
And it might be just like not the time for it. It might be the market for two-player games is different than it was. It might be all these things. It also, I mean, for junk art very specifically, it's how do we manufacture that
Hmm.
is a lot of the question because it's a very big box filled with lots of big
Yeah.
wooden
You
pieces.
can actually get it on Amazon now for the low price of $3.99.99.
Yeah, see? There are copies that exist. It'd be better to go to you'd probably have more fun spending like $350 to fly somewhere that's really out of the way
To buy
and
and
go to
get.
this go to the only game store in that area and buy it for $50. You'd have way more fun.
Yeah.
But if you must have it, then I guess Amazon will
It's
get it to you there by tomorrow because it's
hmm.
probably a Prime product.
But
Who
yeah,
knows?
it does look like that would be hard to figure out how to get it made and published and stuff because there's a lot of parts to it.
Yeah. And I mean that's a big thing in games right now. It's like, well, will it do well on Kickstarter?
Hmm.
Because these are two games that were published before Kickstarter, right? So the level of bling in the box is not very it's not very much. They're very
No.
utilitarian games. And there's not a lot that you'd want to do because the pieces in junk art anyways are already quite big and specific and whatnot. And they actually, it's a funny story. They've been reduced in size three times. So the original prototype, which again I have in my room over there, the original prototypes, let's say those are 100% size. Like when
Hmm.
we made it, that's how big they were, and that's what was signed. And then over development, they were shrunk by 15%. Um, so just to keep costs down and the
Yep.
weight down and the box size down, because if you don't know, the single most expensive component in your game is the box.
Hmm.
It costs a lot of money to make a good box.
Okay.
And originally, junk art came in a wooden box, which made it even more expensive and
Would
more
have been
heavy.
yes.
But it was very much like an heirloom type experience and a game that you would like pass down to your
Hmm.
kids and that kind of thing. And for a lot of people, it is that game. They like love it to death. And their kids love it. And, their kids will play with it just as a toy, but then play a game with their parents. And so a lot of people really enjoyed it. And then when they made the plastic version of it, because the wood version was always intended to be that heirloom experience, and then they said, "Oh, let's make like a more see if we can get into mass market, make it plastic." And they shrunk it again, another 10% from that 15% shrinkage. And I think they shrunk it even one more time to the point where there's a piece in the original game that is actually like a flower pot
Yeah.
that could actually, if you turned it over and looked inside, you could like it has a flat bottom, right? Because
Hmm.
it's like a flower pot. And then now on the newest pieces, like the most recently published piece was like maybe like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, like pre-pandemic. The flower pot, if you turn it over, it no longer has a flat bottom. It has been reduced in size to the point where the bottom is like a triangle, like a cone.
Oh, jeez. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, it's yeah,
because
that
there's no flat
no
bottom
flat.
part. It
Yeah.
went from a big circle to a small circle to like a single point. That's how small it got. It's pretty funny though. It's like because I was playing with it and I put it on top of a cylinder because I used to be able to do this one move where you place a cylinder really tall and then you put the flower pot on top of the cylinder and you put something else on top of the flower pot because it would all balance.
Yeah.
And it was flat. And now the flower pot sits like on a rakish tilt, as if it was some French guy wearing a hat.
It's like,
Because it doesn't have a flat bottom anymore. It has a point. It's very funny.
it makes it a little bit different, I guess. It's you're sort of like,
Yeah,
hey, that's
yeah. And it actually I love the wooden pieces because I love wood,
hmm.
because analog. But the fun thing was that whenever I would run competitions of it, like at conventions and stuff, and I would like have like four tables set up, and at the end of the day, people would get the winners of each table would take a copy home with them. I used the plastic ones because the plastic ones were perfect,
Yeah.
and there was no like variance in the cutting or the staining of it or anything like that. Was it feel good? Not as good, no.
No.
But the precision was a lot better on the machined parts than it was on the wooden cut parts and the turned pieces. So, anyways,
That's all right.
we'll see where it lands. I
Yeah.
mean, it might just be a supply chain issue that over the next couple of years ends up kind of what's the word? Feeling its way out.
Yeah.
Um, that might be what happens, and then we'll
We'll
deal
see
with it
that.
then. Yeah,
Just speaking of Kickstarter, because I'm looking at the off-the-page games, and you
sure.
have now one for Harrow County.
Yeah.
So would you like to talk about that one? Because that's obviously just started recently, and you're trying to get that going.
No, no, that's
Oh,
over.
that's over. Oh, okay. Late pledge open. Late pledge is still open though. It
Yeah,
says
the
on
late
the.
pledge is still open.
It's see,
So,
it's it's still there.
so I will talk about it, even though I didn't even design a thing on it.
Oh no.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's okay. So, Harrow County was designed by Jay and our friend Shad Miller, and there's a really cool story in this, in that it originally was played on three boards. So Jay, despite his friendship with me, never played some of the games that I love. Like he's not into role playing games,
Okay.
and he's not into miniature war games. And I love both of those things. But one day he said, "Oh, I want to make a skirmish game." And he started making it with Shad, who at the time was in Vancouver going to school.
Hmm.
And I live in Ontario, and Jay lives in British Columbia. And if you know anything about Canadian geography,
Oh
that is like
yes.
a
It's
very long distance.
yes.
So
Like
he's
just
on the
it's like a
west
three-hour
coast.
three-hour time difference alone. Never mind trying to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
get to each other. Just a
Yeah,
three-hour
it's
time
it's like
difference.
over 3,000 kilometers away from each other.
Yeah.
So um he's like, I'm gonna work with Shadow. It's like, yeah, whatever. We don't mind. I work with Alara on a lot of games. I work
Hmm.
with David on a lot of games. So we work with a lot of different people, and that's totally fine. We're not monogamous, I guess. I don't know. Um and it originally was a game that was huge. Like you'd play out combat on three different boards, which I guess was sort of like Battlelore and Memoirs
Yeah.
44 in the way that you had like three fronts,
Hmm.
but they were three very different fronts. They were separate boards. You had to win battle. You had to win on two of them to claim victory. And then eventually, Off the Page Games is a company that is focused on the mission is to really highlight creator owned comics, which is this weird niche area of comicdom where the creator of it owns all the rights to it,
Yes.
which is wonderful
Yeah.
and the best of all
Well,
worlds, really.
didn't Image Comic try to do that way back when they first were created? Because they were tired of.
Yeah, and I mean they still do it.
Yeah.
That is the whole mantra of Image Comics,
Hmm.
where Image is like, we will just publish a comic and do whatever else you want us to do, but
But
you don't have to sign all those rights over to
yeah,
us to do the comic.
I think that's a much better way to do it.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah.
It can definitely be. It's there's still like an imprint, there's still like a vetting process through
Hmm.
Image, there's all that kind of stuff. But in the end, you're leveraging their distribution, their brand, all that kind of stuff to get to get your comic out, right?
Yeah.
And if you know anything about the comic distribution scene, it was monopolized by
Yes.
Diamond for many,
Yes.
many years. And
And
that literally just switched over the last little while. So
COVID actually helped make a difference in that one
yeah, it's so weird.
because it was like, wait a
Um,
minute, we can't get it from Diamond, but how else are we supposed to get our comics? We can't survive without a distributor. So yeah.
yeah, well, they're going to they're going to do their own thing, which is very cool. But so with creator owned comics, I think part of why we like them isn't just for like the recognition and the fiscal rewards that the creators get. It's that there's so much love poured into those comics.
Hmm.
They're like works of art and labors of love all at the same time. and they're not like the common Batman, Superman, X-Men type characters. And I've worked on games for those characters too, and they're fun.
Hmm.
But when we get to work on those games, I deal with, Warner Brothers lawyers, right?
Yes.
Or Disney lawyers, even better. And when I work on a game like Harrow County or Mind Management or the next one that's coming up, which is called Manifest Destiny, which is actually an Image title. Speaking of Image,
Ooh.
the other ones are Dark Horse titles. We get to work directly with the creators, right? So
Yeah.
Matt Kindt, who is the author illustrator of Mind Management, is a very good friend of ours, and we work like hand in hand with him. Cullen Bunn and Tyler Crook, who are the creators of Harrow County. Jay and Shad worked hand in hand with them. And for the next set, we're going to be working with the writer and artist of Manifest Destiny and everyone that's coming forward, which we can't talk about yet.
Nope,
Sorry.
that's okay. That's all right.
Those we're going to be working directly with those creators as well,
Nice.
to the point where those creators, because we did such a bang up job on Mind Management, we're getting comics creators asking us,
Oh,
"Hey,
very nice.
can you make us a game?" And we're like, "Yeah."
Yeah. Now,
Um, it's tough though.
yeah. Now these are board games or card games or role playing games.
Oh, well, that's a very good question. I mean,
Yeah.
currently it's all board games.
Okay.
We do have some role-playing games in the far-flung future. Um, Role-playing games are a little harder in a lot of ways, because it's a lot of writing and
Mm-hmm.
and creating of that kind of stuff. Whereas with board games, you can kind of just make the art and it tells its own story. And not that you couldn't do that with some role-playing games or some styles of role-playing games, but a lot of, I think, what people are looking for in role-playing games, especially role-playing games that are based on an intellectual property,
Mm-hmm.
is they want more of that world. They
Yes.
want that world like explained to them.
Mm-hmm.
They want some more insight into that world, and a lot of times that's in a book form, because it's a lot of information. So, and I mean, we found this out from writing Avatar. So I worked on the Avatar Legends RPG. I was one of the writers, and I guarantee you this, that out of the $10 million that we made on that, that might be Canadian. So whatever, however
Oh,
many millions of
so like
dollars
a
we
million
made.
American.
Yeah, I don't know. You can look it up. It's a lot. It may still be like the biggest RPG crowdfunding thing ever, and definitely at the time it was. But out of that vast amount of people who backed it, I think it was like 80,000 people backed it or something ridiculous. I guarantee you that a very large percentage, a not zero percentage of people will never play the game
Yeah.
because they want the book for the source material.
The
They
fluff.
love,
Yeah.
yeah, they love the world of Avatar so much that
Mm-hmm.
they want to have some piece of it, and they want the information that's in that book that is now canonized because it's an official
Well,
product.
I was gonna say you must be the same thing because you said you'd done role playing games and miniatures and stuff. So same
Oh
thing
yeah.
for you, right? It's like, oh, I'll never use this module, but I just want the background for the characters and the building up of the world and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, before Kickstarter, I was a little more pragmatic than that, and I would only buy what I used. But now that there's Kickstarter, and now that I can just look at them and say, "Oh, I'd like that," like I have over in this, there's a huge shelf over
Yeah.
here, and yeah, I mean, I can look at that and go, "Oh yeah, I've never actually played Lancer, and I've never actually played that game, and I've never
Mm-hmm.
actually played that one either." But a lot of it is I support my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I might have played the prototypes of um, some of those games, and a lot of it is it's kind of different than a board game. Like I can read a role playing game and sort of have a whole experience
Mm-hmm.
by reading the rules of it and see and figuring out how this would play out. And a lot of it is, I'm interested in both the system and in the lore, so it makes it very interesting to read role playing game books. which is very different than a board game book. A board game rules like I just want to play.
Well, that's
Let me
just it.
play the
They're
game.
not giving you
Yeah.
very much background of the world or anything. It's sort of like, here's
No.
a brief history, here's a scenario, go.
Yeah, and sometimes not even. Like a
Yeah.
lot of board game players might not even care that
No, no,
much.
no, no. It's like, how do I play it?
Yeah,
And what's the
which
goal?
is sort of sad in some
Yeah.
ways, right?
Especially
But
as a creator, you're like, but I put all this work into telling you.
yeah, so it's interesting in talking about things like mind management or Harrow County and what we do with off the page games is we really are very much into the idea of brand extension, which is the whole reason why a creator would want to, make a game is to
Mhm.
extend the reach of their brand.
Yes.
And this is a cool kind of story to tell is that I'm pretty sure somebody from Dark Horse might say no, that's not what happened. But I'm going to claim this right here, right now
Mm-hmm.
on your podcast that we are single-handedly responsible for probably not single-handedly, but partially.
Majorly.
Yeah, a majority of the responsibility, a majority of the blame lies on us. Or blame, I don't know, excuse, reason, whatever, lies on us for the reprinting of Matt's comic books. Um, yeah, so what happened when we first did the print runs for Mind Management, and especially when Shut Up and Sit Down did their review of the game, there was a huge kind of burst of interest in the game, so much so that we had to run a second Kickstarter. Um, and in totality, the two Kickstarters made, I think, over $1 million, which is great for like a first time
Mm-hmm.
company that's using a not a super well known license that has quite divisive art in it because lots of people like that is the weirdest art ever, and some people are like I love it. So it depends. It's not kind of that standard comic book art that you're like, yeah, I get it. It's
Mm-hmm.
comic books. This is a little bit weird because Matt's a little bit weird. Matt's a lot weird. Matt's a very weird guy. And he would probably just appreciate it totally that I think he's weird. He knows I think he's weird. Yeah. Anyways, so what happened was that there was such an influx in interest in what is this mind
Yeah.
management? Like the game is awesome. We love the game. But what is this world you're talking about? Why are there psychic monks and why are there dogs that are, bombers and why is there a psychic dolphin that helps us? What is this? What is going on here? What is this flux house thing? And so when we made the game, we didn't tell anybody anything about almost all of that. We built it into the game in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So Matt drew new comics for the game itself.
Oh, cool.
If you
Yeah.
open up the box, there are secret hidden codes all over the box.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you any of them because they're secret. Go find them. There are, if you turn over the board, there's a whole comic on the board.
Oh.
There's a comic on the mini board that the recruiter uses behind the screen. And if you turn that over and turn the board over and put them together, oh,
Oh my goodness. Okay, there's a lot of detail in this.
yeah.
Then.
And the shift system, which is in my opinion, the coolest part of the game, which I'll talk about in a second. But in the shift system, there's, I don't know, I can't remember, 16 boxes. There's a lot of boxes, a lot of little boxes. However many they were, I don't remember. I could go count, but
There's
each
enough.
box
There's a fair
has
amount.
a lot.
Yeah.
Each box has a little comic in it.
Oh my god.
So Matt drew a new
He did a lot of work then.
Oh yeah. Matt is fully a partner on this one,
Yeah.
right? So it's not just like, hey, you can license my IP and give me a bunch of money.
Yeah.
It's no, this is my baby. I want a stake in it. I want to create new stuff for it. I want people to like this. And so what happened was people were like, I like all of this stuff. Where can I learn more?
Mhm.
And we're like, hey, go order the omnibuses or whatever. And Dark Horse is like, we don't have. I guess we got to reprint some more omnibuses.
They're like,
right?
what do you mean omnibus? Can
Yeah.
you give us?
So again, that's the way it worked in my head.
Yeah.
I can't swear this is exactly how it happened, but there was definitely some reprinting that happened after the game was released, and whether that's just a confluence of great things, because Mind Management, Matt is a New York Times best-selling author, all this kind of stuff. So he's a big dude in the world of comics. He did Berserker with Keanu Reeves.
Oh, that okay. I have that one. I have that series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Matt's the writer on that with Keanu. And so well, and then there was, other there's always stuff surrounding Matt in terms of, his work getting optioned for movies or TV series and things like that. So it could also have been that. Might have also been that.
Nah, you guys take the credit.
Yeah,
Take the
we'll
credit.
take the credit. But I think it was the game. And I think it was the game because it did exactly what it was supposed to. It enticed the audience, the gamers, to say, what is going on here? And I want to know more. And that's sort of what we're doing with Off the Page Games is we want people to go read these comic books that we love, right? We don't necessarily do work for just anybody.
Okay.
We want to love the comic too, right? We're like, is that a good comic? Does it have a following? Do we personally like that comic? If so, then let's talk about it. Let's see what that could become.
So could there be possibly a Berserker game coming up sometime in the future for Off the Page?
I mean, we would love that.
Yeah.
We'd have to talk to Keanu.
Well, talk to Matt to talk to Keanu, right? You already have it in with Matt, so you're
Yeah,
like, hey.
I mean, so it is pretty funny that we're like what 2 degrees of separation from Keanu Reeves.
That
or
is
whatever,
actually yes.
which is kind of hilarious. But yeah, it's well, if you've read the comic, Berserker is a comic about this immortal warrior who is going through time basically and going back and forth through time, and there's a lot of trauma and PTSD type stuff going on there because he's a guy who can never die but gets hurt an awful lot.
And
I don't
is
know
tired of his life.
Yeah, you're right. And so the question would be, what would that game be?
Yeah.
And that's the job of myself and Jay is to figure out how would we represent that in a in a game, right?
Game, yeah.
Because a lot of comics don't necessarily lend themselves to games in a competitive way. A lot of comics do lend themselves to games in a cooperative way, like your classic superhero type comic.
Yeah, like the X-Men game and that, where you're
yeah, everybody plays one of the X-Men and you do something to beat Apocalypse or Magneto or Mr. Sinister or whoever, right?
Yeah.
Depending on what story arc you're following. And that's what we did in Mind Management. We had not necessarily co-op, but it's one versus many. And it was this really interesting process where it's like, what is Mind Management about? And we asked Matt, and this is sort of my job as a designer developer. So I do a lot of development for other people's games as well. And my job is really to take a look at what is the actual intention and how do we translate that onto the game board. Even when I'm working with somebody else's game, I need to know, what was your intention? And let's say, Patrick, you had a game and you signed it with, who's your favorite publisher?
You mean comics or anything at the moment?
No, board game publisher.
Oh, board game. Oh, I'm not too familiar with all of them. I'm sorry. I know there's a huge one, the evil one, Hasbro.
Okay, so let's say you signed a game with Hasbro.
Okay.
And Hasbro likes your game. Now, Hasbro has internal developers, so I wouldn't ever work with them in that capacity. But let's say I was one of their developers. My job would probably be to take your intention and their idea about how they're going to market it and how they're going to present it and how they're going to sell it and merge those two things together, right? So I'm really interested in what was the original creator's vision for this game.
Okay, what's the intent? Like, what do you want to...
Yeah. And so when we... No. And so when we work with comic creators, it's the same idea. We really, really desperately want to know, what was your vision? What's your intent? Because we want that story to translate onto the board game, especially because we're probably not telling the story of the comic. Because nobody wants that.
No.
It's really funny, right? So it's the kind of thing that you think people want, but they really don't. Like, nobody wants to replay the exact story in a game, because they've already read it
They want to
or
they want to
watched
have a
the movie.
variation. It's
Yeah,
that what if
yeah,
scenario sort of
yeah.
idea, right?
Or they want a self-insert where they
Mhm.
can be part of that world, or a side story, right? So, or a story told from a different viewpoint
Mhm.
or in a different way. And so what we did in my management was ask Matt, like, what is my management about at a very high level?
Yeah.
Because we've all read the story, we all get it. It's, at this level, it's about this, but at a high level. So he said, well, really, it's about the question of, is it better to have a little bit of power invested in lots of different people, but those people are subject to or at the risk of corruption? Or is it better to have a few very powerful people that are not as corruptible and are, watching each other? Um, and that was the real question, right? And so the original game that we came up with, which was very funny, I still have it in a box. I keep all my prototypes. Is almost kind of like a pandemic-y kind of game. If you remember
Oh yes,
Pandemic.
I remember Pandemic. Yes, that was a fun game. We enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, where the world kind of explodes.
Yeah.
And so because that's what the mind management agents are really doing. They're managing crises
Crises.
around the world. Um, and the original game that we had was like Pandemic, where crisis would happen and you'd have to send a team to sort it all out. But if you didn't have enough ability to solve the different problems, you could ask for other agents to help you. And those other agents weren't necessarily player characters, they were just agents that you'd say,
Utilize.
yeah, like a resource.
Yeah.
But the problem is, once you use too many of them, now the risk of corruption increased. And it was a really kind of a cool overall idea, but the execution didn't really work out. And so we shelved that. We made another one where the whole idea, because mind management is a lot about basically, I guess, being gaslit, right? Because psychic powers, right? It's like, did I really see what I just saw? Um, and we wanted to leverage Matt's art, and we wanted to see if we could make a card game where you could tell a story with the cards, and no matter what order you put those cards in, it would actually make visual sense, like a sequential storytelling
Oh, no.
comic book strip,
Yes.
but out of cards. And that one might have been a little too, what's the word? Um,
Optimistic.
Yes. Yes, a little too optimistic for us to actually make that game, because it was a really neat idea, but it didn't really work. And Matt loves games, and this is how Matt and Jay and I met. There's a long story, and it begins with Gen Con,
Mm.
being at Gen Con, and running into Charlie Chu, who at the time was the editor at Oni Press. And Oni Press was at the time, and still, producing Six Gun. So
Oh
Six Gun
yes, yes.
is,
They actually have a new
yes,
Kickstarter out.
yeah, they do right now for a
Yes.
very nice version
Mm-hmm.
that I will probably not get because I have all of the original trades, and some of the original floppies for that one.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I'm gonna go in, which is sad because Brian and and Cullen are good friends. So it's like, well, maybe I will. You'll know, we'll see. We'll see
Mm.
what I get of that.
You
You
probably
just
will. You probably will.
well, just talking to you right now makes me think about it. Well, it's so funny. So I was talking to Michael Avon Oming, who is the artist for Powers. If you remember Powers, the
Yes,
comic
yeah,
book.
that years ago. Yes.
Yeah, which is a great comic book. If you like procedurals, like cop procedurals plus superheroes,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing. It is 1 billion times better than the TV show.
Okay.
The TV show was not,
Nuts.
unfortunate.
I
It was
didn't
not
actually
very
see it. I
funny.
just remember that I had some of the first comics, and I was like, oh, those are really interesting. And then unfortunately, wasn't able to continue.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you should go find it. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's Bendis, Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Avon Oming, and it's a great series. Anyway, so he he did a series with Brian Glass, and I think Victor Santos did some of the art at the end, called Mice Templar. And I had started reading Mice Templar when I was not as, I guess, wealthy as I am now. And so I read it all at the library. Because libraries are awesome. Libraries are my
Yes.
favorite place in the world.
More people should
Librarians
support
are,
support your local library.
yeah, librarians are some of my favorite people in the world. So I love libraries, and that's why I read my Templar. And yesterday, literally yesterday, and that's why I said there might be some deliveries. I went on Amazon and I looked at my comic shelf. Well, I looked at my comic shelf first, and then I went on Amazon. I said, I have enough money to fill out all the things that I'm missing.
Nice.
And so I went and spent like, I don't know, like maybe $1,000 on
Yeah.
comics yesterday.
Now, does your wife know about that, or is this sort of one of those that be the surprise later on of like,
Oh
hey?
no. So no,
Okay.
we're not like that. My
Okay.
wife
Good.
has a separate bank account. I have a separate bank account. Um, we
Yeah.
we're fine. We like, I don't question what she buys, and she doesn't
Oh,
question what
that's
I
good.
buy.
Good. That's good to hear. Okay, it's sort of
Yeah.
one's like, what is this delivery, Sen?
Oh no,
Okay.
it's never like that, and
Okay.
it's I actually get really kind of, upset about those types of memes and whatnot when people post that about hiding their board games from their wife. It's like,
No.
how about you just talk to them?
Well,
How about
it's
you talk
also
to your
like
wife?
the few interviews I've done, everyone's like, without the family support, they wouldn't be able to do all the stuff they're doing, right?
Entirely, entirely.
It's like,
Without my wife being as understanding as she is about my process, that sounds really artistic. But also the fact that I almost never sleep and that I'm
mhm.
gone for long periods of time to like weird places like Indianapolis to play games. I couldn't do any of this. And I think we need to recognize a lot of like the unpaid labor that women do in society.
Yes,
And also that, we can buy games if we want to. And if we have a partner that doesn't support that, well,
yeah,
that's a
that's
bigger discussion than the game itself,
mm-hmm.
right? So yeah,
Well, you said you have a 20-year-old now.
yeah,
Is he
he
gonna
is old.
is he, as you look back, you're like, wait, did I just say he was? That means I'm yeah.
He is.
Is he gonna start? Has he shown an interest in joining you in this or?
Oh yeah, so Ethan and Eli, so Eli's my 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Um both of them have writing credits for role-playing games
Oh,
already.
wow, nice.
Cuz well, they help me, right? Cuz
Yeah.
like I'm like writing a game and like, so give me the names and what's the scenario, and tell me about this person, and I just write and they tell me, and then I merge it all in. So they've got some writing credits on some role-playing stuff for like kids on bikes and whatnot. And Ethan this year, so they've done a lot of volunteering at conventions. They've been to a lot of conventions. Like they go to Dice Tower with me when it was pre-pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and they go to the Toronto-based ones that are near me, and the London-based ones, which are like right where I live in London, Ontario.
Yeah.
It's funny that when I said, "Oh, I have to tell my wife something," what she wanted me to tell her was how many years did the boys volunteer at the Comic-Con here in London, because my youngest is writing a resume.
Oh, and right. Of course, that shows volunteer hours and
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so see, it all wraps
it
around.
does.
All Everything we talked about today off camera has come up in this podcast, except my kettle. My kettle has not yet come up.
Not
But
yet.
there it just did. So now we just talked about my kettle being loud. So anyway, yeah, so yesterday I went and filled out a bunch of shelves on my comic shelf. Said, "Oh, I missed that
Mm-hmm.
issue." And it was the same thing with my Templar. But then I looked at the prices at my Templar. They're like $100 for each trade, and it's like,
That's a
I
little
can't
much.
I can't do that quite
No,
yet.
no.
So and it was like not all there, and I'm the
Mm-hmm.
kind of person who's like, I need it all now.
Yes.
And if I'm gonna spend that much money, I want it all. I don't want to be like searching
Slowly,
for
like, oh,
pieces.
here a bit, couple
Yeah,
months here, a couple months there. Yeah.
yeah. So we'll see. I did buy all of Usagi Yojimbo, which is
Mm.
one of my favorite comics of all time. And the thing is exactly the same thing. Like when I was a poor student, I read that in the library and I
Yeah.
loved it. I Stan Sakai is a brilliant author, uh, the best letterer in the business, and I would love to work with Stan. Stan, if you're listening, I would love to work with you someday. I told him that at Comic Con a couple years ago. I said,
Okay.
Oh, I make a lot of games with IDW, and now you're signed with IDW. What do you think? And then IDW kind of like the games division went under, so
Yeah,
unfortunately
that's too bad.
we never got to do that together. But yeah, Stan, let's make a game. Uh, but yeah, so I filled out a bunch of comic shelves yesterday. So the Amazon driver might be ringing my
He also
doorbell.
might be complaining. How much did you order? I know they don't. They don't care.
Yeah, well, I mean, 6 orders just came up on my phone saying these 6 orders have shipped.
Yeah,
So,
I just spent a fair amount because we're in a new development and power outages have happened, and
oh no.
especially when you're doing a recording with someone at the time, and all of a sudden you're just like power out. So I went to Amazon. Battery backup. All right, how much is it? Well, I need it.
Yeah. And now you should get like a generator.
Well, that's further down the line. Yeah, it would be nice, but at least an extra 5-10 minutes to go. Oh crap! I'm about to lose everything. You know.
Yeah.
So going back to things now,
Mhm.
you're talking about because the your friend Jay wanted to make a skirmish game. Have you thought of that
Yeah.
yourself? So what are some of the miniature games you've done? Have you like Warhammer? Warhammer is the biggest one, right? Everyone knows Warhammer.
Oh yeah. So games that I've played,
Yeah.
it was I mean mostly Warhammer because
Hmm.
that's what everybody else is playing.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, right? With all those lifestyle games like Magic the Gathering and Warhammer, if there's no community, there's no game.
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter if you love like I don't know, Corvus Belly or something. If nobody in your community plays it, they all play Warhammer. Guess what? You
You're
are
playing.
also now playing
Yeah.
Warhammer if you want to play miniature games.
Yeah.
Or you need to really convince
That
somebody to invest
minute.
in new miniatures and stuff.
Because I don't know if you've heard one. It was called Ethereum. Ethereum. It was basically sort of
No.
like you're in the Matrix, and that's so you get to do some reality bending as a
Oh,
board
fun.
as a little miniature game. So I have a copy, but again, no one plays it, right? So it's like, all right,
Yeah, so that's I guess let me think. What did I like a lot? Uh Iron Kingdom stuff,
mhm.
right? So Privateer Press, and War Machine,
Oh my,
Hordes.
yeah.
I like those two systems. I like those systems better than Warhammer, but again, it's finding a community,
Hmm.
and then buying the miniatures. And I can't paint, so speaking of Ethan, my oldest, 20 years ago, I still have unpainted miniatures that I bought when he was born, thinking stupidly that oh, when the baby's asleep, I'll paint
Hmm.
things.
Yes, yes, yep. Never
No.
happened. No.
A, the baby did not sleep a lot,
Yes.
because colicky babies are like that. And B, when he was asleep, guess who also had to
Well,
sleep?
that's the thing for parents. It's like if it's
Yes.
baby sleeping, I'm sleeping.
Yeah, you sleep when you can.
Yeah.
You are not painting a cat or army.
Oh no,
You're
no.
not doing that.
Nice idea though. Again, sort of
Yeah.
unrealistic because you're like, hey,
Hmm.
yeah, I'll have all this
Yeah,
time.
so yeah, I actually I think the reason why I like War Machine and Hordes better is because it has a little more like board gamey feel to it.
Okay. Yeah.
Like the action economy is a little bit better for my brain. But you know, the lore of 40K is so cool. Um, the boys play 40K because that's what their friends play, right?
Hmm.
I tried to get them into Hordes, and they're like, my friends don't play that. They will play this,
Yeah.
and so that's what they play.
See, for me, it's the fluff of the Warhammer 40K because they've
Yeah, yeah, the
improved
lore,
over the
yeah.
last few years. I mean, when the first
Hmm.
editions came out, it was sort of like, okay, this is cheesy craziness, but they decided, okay, we're going to make this our lore now.
Yeah, so
And
they've done a lot of much better things over the last couple of years. And shouts out to my friend Brian Dugas, who just got a job as a modeler at Games
oh,
Workshop,
cool. What's his
which
last
is
name?
like
Brian who?
Dugas, which is a like a coveted position if you're a sculptor.
Oh yes. No, because I've been to Adepticon and stuff like that. So that's, and I have to admit now, it's interesting because now that you're a developer and all that, Games Workshops a few years ago decided to start slamming any YouTuber who was doing stuff for based on their IP, which of course caused a
Oh yeah, like
backlash.
the whole Space Marines.
Yeah, because it caused a backlash because like, well, they're your community. They're the guys who support you. they're doing this out of love. So if all of a sudden you start slamming all these YouTube creators, and there was backlash, so Games Workshop learned from that. And then along comes Hasbro last year, where they're like, you know what Games Workshop did? We're going to take it even further.
Yeah, we're gonna send, cops. Yeah, it's problematic.
Yeah.
And like, so it's very interesting. I can guarantee you that nobody on the design side has anything to say about any of that stuff that happened
Hmm.
ever. Ever. Like that decision is made at
Oh,
corporate
that
legal
yes.
level, right? And it's not made at the design level. So
Well, I'm sure most designers are also like, wait, what are you doing? This is not going to
exactly.
help us.
Well, so especially in places like Wizards of the Coast,
Hmm.
it's on the West Coast. It's very liberal
Hmm.
as a company, and the creators are also, and they're aghast. They would
Hmm.
Most of them are probably quite aghast at what
I
happened in
imagine so.
the last year. So
Hypothetical for you.
sure.
You could work on any IP anywhere. What's the one that you'd say, hey, that's, comic, board, anything.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
the one that I'd want to get my hands on to work for a board game for.
Probably I mean, it probably is Usagi, because I've done Avatar twice. I did Cora, the board game, and I did Avatar, the role playing game. And that's like probably my favorite thing. And I did Batman the Animated Series as a board game, so
Ooh,
that's like
really?
my second. Yeah, it's
Oh,
like my second favorite kind of animated thing. I like animation.
yeah.
And then so it would probably be Usagi for comic books. I mean, there's a bunch of Japanese stuff that I love
Hmm.
because I love anime, but we'll see.
We'll
We'll
see.
see.
Like, I don't see. How would you do Akira as a board game? I don't know if you could do it.
No, but it'd be a really cool role playing game.
Yes.
So I'm lucky, I guess, in the fact that I have the skills and the ability to make all sorts of games,
Hmm.
which is not what everybody does. So I've been able to, get a foothold into multiple sides of the analog gaming space,
Nice.
which is nice because role playing was my first love. That
Hmm.
was what I started out with, and board games really, and miniature games and card games were really a supplement or a stopgap
Hmm.
when I couldn't do role playing. So I gave up. I actually literally quit role playing games when I went to university
Ooh.
because I was failing out of university. And
Okay.
now I'm a professor, so I don't know. It was probably a good idea that I gave up role playing games for a good like
Yeah, I
nine
can attest
years.
to making a mistake and doing lots of role playing and stuff and strategy games during university. Did not work out well.
Right? And I mean, did I learn from that? Yes. Did I
Hmm.
learn from playing those games? Also,
Hmm.
yes. But I think, my kids are actually quite upset at me because again, I've mentioned Magic. I had four of every card ever um, up
Ooh,
until I believe Fallen Empires, like four of everything.
man, yeah.
I mean, four of every Mox and four Lotuses and
And you
four
got rid
Tie
of them?
Blocks and four... I sold them all. Yeah.
Oh yeah, your kids nowadays be like, Dad, that would have been a retirement fund. I could have been going to
Oh,
college.
it would have been a lot of money.
Yeah,
But it allowed me to finish my postgrad, right?
nice.
So I paid for my postgraduate
Well,
degrees with
that's
money from
worked
Magic.
out then. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of my friends, they went on and did pro gaming, and
Mm-hmm.
they paid for whatever they did with Magic. So I think Magic has paid for a lot of things in a lot of ways, right?
Well, it works. One board game, well, sort of board game, card game I'm familiar with is Legendary, the Marvel ones,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and unfortunately, again, no one around me plays. So we've been doing remote with a buddy in Waterloo, which it's not quite the same thing because you both have the sets and you have the cards, and you're like, wait, well, where are we on this situation?
Yeah. That is kind of hard. I So it's interesting. The legendary system, I don't love it for the superhero stuff, but I really liked the
Big Trouble in Little
it,
China.
well, yes, Big Trouble Little China is one of my favorite movies ever.
Yes.
Uh
Oh.
and I got to do the development on the board game for everything epic and Boom Studios
Hmm.
comic, and that was super great. It was a lot of work, but it was really, really good. Yeah, so it's a
Yep.
Boom Studios comic,
Okay.
and then Everything Epic is the board game publisher
Okay.
behind the thing, and it's beautiful. Like there's great art because of the comic assets, and the miniatures are cool, and it tells a great story. But no, yeah. So those the movie based legendaries I like
Yes.
better, because the story that it tells is better. So like Aliens and Predator,
Yes.
those are lovely, lovely, lovely games. The superhero one I didn't like as much because I couldn't wrap my head around why these heroes are fighting each other, right?
Hmm.
It's harder for me to do that.
But again, I
Uh,
mean, in the comics, that
it
happens all the
does, it
time.
does. I get it, I get it. And
I
some of them could be clones of each other. There's a whole bunch of Skrull running around. I understand. I get it. But for my dollar, I'd rather not play that if I could play Aliens
Hmm.
or Predator,
Right.
which uses roughly the same system, but done in a more cohesive fashion, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah. I was gonna say I have a I feel sorry for some comic book writers just because if they're working on the big ones, they can't kill any characters. Like you can't kill Wolverine. If you do, you have to bring him back. And it's like, well, how do you tell a new story with someone like, Spider-Man or Superman after 50, 60 years?
Well, I mean, as you've seen, you really can't
No, yes.
in a lot of ways. So I mean, like they reboot the main characters, like
Mhm.
the Trinity's been rebooted. Well, I
Again,
mean, Wonder Woman's just started, but
yeah.
Batman and Superman have been rebooted umpteen
Oh,
times now, right? In
mhm.
many different incarnations, whether it's Smallville, which is actually a really cool
Good.
incarnation to be honest,
Yeah.
or all the Man of Steel, or the original the movie series, or all the Batmans. The
Oh
Batmans
God,
are,
jeez. Yeah,
and it just gets a little bit sort of, I don't know, ridiculous
It
after a
it
while.
it does. And it's like
But
just as a fan, it's like, okay, I know the origin story of Batman. I don't need to see it again or hear about it. Like,
yeah, which is why I always loved Elsewheres.
mm,
If you know, like the Elsewhere series, or what, it's basically DC's What If.
what if? Yes.
What if and Elsewhere, these kind of hypothetical situations, like what if,
Superman was
you know,
found in Russia,
yeah, or
uh,
something like that, which is basically Red Sun,
which
right?
is a great. It's a great series. I liked it.
Yeah, and those speculative fiction on speculative fiction,
Yeah.
that's what I like, when you do an alternate take on something, because now you can play around with things that are callbacks to the original canon series, the canon of the original series,
Hmm.
but address it in different ways, right? So just like I like gender flipped cosplay because
Oh,
it's interesting.
yeah. See, I always tell people like when they get upset, like, oh, well, that person's not supposed to be like this or that. It's like, as long as the core character is usually the same, I could care less.
Yeah,
Right? Like when people
yeah.
first got upset, Hugh Jackman's playing Wolverine. It's like, who cares? Well, he's too
He's not.
tall.
Yeah,
Who cares? Like,
he's not Canadian enough. That's
yeah,
I might have a he's not Canadian enough, but
yes, but it's only like the core character, is still there. So,
yeah, and movie magic, right?
hmm,
He ends up looking
sure,
smaller than everybody else, anyways.
yes,
Yeah, I don't think
the
Jackman's a
reverse Tom
bad
Cruise,
choice.
you would say.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard to tell new stories.
Hmm.
And that again, that's another reason why we choose to work with creator-owned comics, because they do whatever the heck they
No,
want.
too. Is there a future for Bamboozle Brothers? Or are you just going to sort of like keep that as an inside joke for people?
It'll probably just be an inside joke.
Okay.
We're pretty committed to off the page games as
Hmm.
a thing. Jay is obviously very committed to it, and it's sort of as I get older and I'm thinking about retirement, it's like, okay, so what can we really do with this company,
Hmm.
if I also sign on and join on
Yeah.
full time with it, because Jay's only part time doing it, and
It's a lot
I
of
have a full
work.
time job. It's a ton of work, right?
It's.
But the thing is, we talked about this. We talked about this just recently. Jay was visiting from BC, and he and I were talking because when I retire, I could, like, what would we do with an influx of cash,
Hmm.
right? That would be able to be put towards this this position, right?
Yeah, and an influx
I
of
could,
time. Like you'd have money
yeah,
and time to put into.
yeah. And we were thinking we actually wouldn't be able to do much different than we do now because of the amount of love and effort that we put into each and every game that we make, which is what makes them the games that they are.
Hmm.
Like we're not looking to like slap an IP on some existing thing and say done. We're looking to make a game that the fans of the comic book will appreciate and that gaming fans will go, oh, that is a good game, no matter if I like this IP or not.
Okay, that's good.
And the reason why is because we want to extend the brand, right? Again, we want to make sure that comic book people end up seeing our brand and buying our games because they know we do good games. And people who know we do good games end up saying, oh, what's this comic about?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go check it out.
Well, like you
Even
said,
like the digital download or
you know,
whatever.
when a comic book creator reaches out to you, going, "Hey, can you help? Help me design a board game?" That's a great sign when they're willing to come to you and say, "Hey, can you help us out?"
Yeah, so this is possibly, I don't know, might be the biggest feather in our caps ever. Is we got nominated for a Harvey Award,
What?
which is bizarre, right?
Yeah.
We don't write comics, but there's actually a Harvey category for best adaptation.
Okay.
And I believe we are the first and only ever board game adaptation in that. It was us against like Miss Marvel and, Captain Marvel movie and,
Hmm.
all these. It wasn't Captain Marvel, it's probably some other movie, but a
But
lot of
still,
movies and Netflix series and Disney Plus series and stuff like that. And then our little board game stuck in there.
congratulations. No, that's a great feeling. You're like, "Hey, that's that you get recognized."
It is because like I've been reading about the Harvey Awards for decades, right? Eisner Awards, Harvey
Hmm.
Awards, all those comic awards have always been awards that I've been like, I know what those are.
You're never going to see it because you do a
Yeah, but
board
it's
game.
not, yeah, it's not a game industry thing. But then we made something that they have a category for, and it was like, that was awesome. And we didn't apply. Like a lot of awards are you have to apply to
Hmm.
be part of the awards. This
Yes.
was like peers of
Nominating you.
nominated this for it,
Yes.
and they're not peers of ours, they're peers of probably Matt's and
Yeah.
peers of like they're like that is a great adaptation of a comic into the form where it like lives and breathes and oozes the mind management oeuvre, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we hope to do for every game, and that's exactly why even if I go full time and even if I bring a boatload of cash with me to say
It's
let's inject what I have in my retirement funds into the game thing so we can generate more stuff, probably
probably.
we won't need to
Yeah.
do
You might
that
also
in a
like
lot
you
of
also
ways.
might lose that love feeling, right? If you like, there's a whole bunch of cash, that might lose that sort of, that personal
The
love.
desperate art feeling.
It's
Well, no, the cash would just make it easier in some ways.
yeah. Well, then you could hire like
Um,
editor, like extra people to.
oh, I mean, we do that anyway.
Yeah.
Like we're already doing that. We just do it on the back end of like we pay for it and we recoup it off of the
All
Kickstarter.
right. Okay.
But a lot of that stuff gets paid first, which is funny. So if you understand anything about like publishing, it's sort of funny that a lot of the people who help create the game
Hmm.
get paid up front, which is great. Like the artists and the graphic designers and all that stuff, that all gets paid up front. The editors, it's the creatives, like
Hmm.
the people who design the game. They usually have to wait
For the
until everything,
Kickstarter to go
yeah,
through.
because they're on royalties, right? And so
Hmm.
that's a little bit different. So we're trying to work on some stuff right now to change that a little bit industry wide, maybe, so that designers can maybe get more advances or more of a normal thing, or even just like a signing bonus is more of a normal thing. So
Yeah.
it's difficult though because the margins are really tight.
Hmm.
There's a saying that the best way to make $1 million in the gaming industry is to start with $2 million, right? So
Yeah.
and somebody else always says if you can afford to drive a Toyota Corolla into a river, you can afford to start a game company. That kind of thing. Like it's like
Yeah.
30 to $40,000 worth of money and
Just a throwaway.
just to throw away.
Yeah.
Then you can start game publishing. But
Well,
yeah.
well, that's great. So before, is there anything last you words of advice to new people or anything they're saying, or do you want to say, hey, come on, if you have ideas, send it to us or anything? Or...
Yeah, I mean, so Unfortunately for off the page games, like we don't really take submissions. Or Jay doesn't take submissions. I don't take submissions either, but Jay for sure doesn't. Because again, we really are focusing on a very specific comic
Hmm.
game relationship, and we have to have a relationship with that comic creator
Yep. Yep.
before we make a game with them, right? So it's like we want to know that that comic creator is willing to do something more over and above than just sign the IP to us. Like they have to be, we're going to create new art for the game. We're going to do the original, art. We're going to write a new story. We're
For
going
the
to put a new
game, yeah.
comic in it. Yeah, because we really need that buy-in.
Hmm.
And your favorite comic, who knows what that creator is willing or not willing to do.
Right.
So I wouldn't necessarily pitch to Jay in that regard.
No
Uh,
worries.
yeah, I don't even pitch to Jay
Yeah,
in that
but
regard.
but still, for our viewers, keep an eye on for off the pages games,
Yeah.
and
So mine management is out already. Harrow County, the late pledges I think are still open, maybe for a little while longer. And then our next game will be Manifest Destiny. We're showing that at Gen Con over August, the beginning of August, and then I'll be at Big Bad Con in San Francisco in September, the end of September, and I will bring it with me there.
oh,
So we'll
nice.
take a look at it there if you're at those cons. And yeah, I mean, just some advice, I guess, is get the game out of your head, put it on the table as soon as you can. Don't just think about it. You have
Hmm.
to actually play
Put
it to know if it is a game
test it with a
that
bunch of,
will
and
work.
also test with different people, I guess
Oh
too. That
yeah. Start with yourself, move to your friends, but quickly get out of your comfort zone
hmm
and test with people who are going to be a little more honest with you, right? About whether or not it's actually interesting or fun. But yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you very much, Sen, and thank you, viewers, for everything. Links will be in the description below, and you have yourselves a great day.